The evening whispered of autumn's quiet arrival, cool air carrying the scent of distant rain and fallen leaves as Jack Matthews pushed open the familiar, creaking door of Murphy's Corner. The old neighborhood bar stood mostly empty, just the way Jack liked it after another bone-deep exhausting day. The low hum of jazz pulsed softly through the room, wrapping the wooden walls in a melancholy rhythm. Murphy, without a word, slid Jack's usual draft across the bar. Jack gave a slight nod of thanks and lowered himself onto the stool that had, over the years, become his quiet refuge. He didn't look up when she entered, elegance wrapped in precision. The woman walked in with the kind of composure that came from a lifetime of controlling the uncontrollable sharp lines of a tailored designer suit, an immaculate wristwatch, every strand of hair in obedient place. She took the seat 3 stools down, placed her phone face down as if to silence the rest of the world, and ordered a whiskey neat. The strangers sat side by side in near silence, connected only by proximity and the gentle ache of Miles Davis drifting through the speakers. Jack didn't expect conversation. He didn't seek it, but she turned to him, eyes intense with something unspoken, something desperate, and asked a question that cracked the stillness open. "If you had one wish," she said softly, "who would you use it for?" Jack Matthews hadn't prepared to answer that. He hadn't prepared for any of this. He hadn't planned on raising a child alone. At 40, his life was no longer filled with plans but with responsibility, compromise, and quiet surrender. 8 years earlier, he had been a promising mechanical engineer with a good salary, a good name in the industry, and a wife who turned every ordinary moment into something sacred. Her name had been Sarah, gentle, strong, with a laugh that could soften the sharpest days. Then came Lily, their miracle, tiny, radiant, and with eyes that mirrored both of them. Their home was love. Their future was certain, until it wasn't. Sarah's congenital heart condition, always manageable, always stable, turned catastrophic in the blink of an eye. Unforeseen complications, the doctors had said, as though grief could be coded in sterile language, acute cardiac event. She had kissed him good night and never woken up. And Jack, shell-shocked, broken, was left holding a toddler who kept asking, over and over, when Mommy would be back. The house went first sold to pay the medical bills, then the job. The deadlines and hours were merciless, incompatible with a grieving child and a grieving father. He traded his high-rise office for a modest 2-bedroom apartment and opened a humble repair shop under his family name, Matthews Repair, fixing industrial motors, broken blenders, and whatever else limped through the door. It wasn't elegant, but it kept the lights on, paid for dance shoes and school books, and allowed him to pick Lily up every day at 3 o'clock. Sharp his hands, once steady instruments of high-level design, were now calloused and permanently greased. But those same hands also learned how to braid Lily's hair, slice sandwiches diagonally just the way she liked, and tie shoelaces with patient fingers that had learned fatherhood one uncertain knot at a time. Every night, they sat on the balcony for 10 minutes and searched for stars, especially the North Star. Jack had told Lily it was a fixed point, a way home when you're lost. She believed him. Sometimes he believed it too. Their life was quiet, humble, unplanned, but it was real, and it was his sanctuary. Dating had long since been locked away in some far corner of his heart. Sarah's absence wasn't a haunting. It was a presence of memory woven into their daily rituals. Jack hadn't had a meaningful conversation with another adult in years, not one that wasn't about fixing machines or Lily's school performance, until tonight. And now, this woman beside him, polished, mysterious, beautiful in a way that hinted at loneliness, had asked a question that slipped past his defenses. "My daughter," he answered, his voice steady, "to give her everything I can." She turned toward him slightly, her expression cracking just a little. "Not for yourself." "She is myself," Jack said, surprised by how easy the truth came. Elena Winters, 35, a name spoken in boardrooms with reverence. She was the mind and force behind Horizon Tech, a billion-dollar titan in the world of innovation. Her face graced the covers of magazines, Her voice held sway over markets. Her email inbox overflowed with invitations, proposals, and expectations. Success had always been the currency of her world, and she had spent it well, raised by brilliant but emotionally barren academics. She had been taught that feelings were inefficiencies and love was a distraction. Her childhood had been lived in the shadow of benchmarks and test scores. By 16, she had published her first research paper. By 24, she was pitching to Silicon Valley's top investors. By 30, she was a tech mogul. But in all the glossy articles, none had ever captured the sharp ache of waking up alone in a penthouse that felt more like a showroom than a home, or the dull exhaustion of never being touched except by stylists or handshake deals. Her assistant knew her food, allergies, and sleep schedule better than her family did. Friends, they had slowly become calendar entries, long overdue. 6 months ago, she ended her engagement after overhearing her fiancé discuss their relationship. In terms of synergy and corporate alignment, she had laughed in public, excused herself, and cried alone in a hotel suite that night. She had built an empire, but no one needed her for her, only for what she could give. Tonight, she left the black car idling on the street, told her driver to take the night off, and walked 6 blocks, heels on pavement. She chose the first quiet place that didn't have her name on the guest list, and now she was here, drinking whiskey beside a man with oil-stained hands who answered her question without hesitation. As the night deepened, so did the conversation, not small talk, not performance, just unvarnished truth, exchanged like sacred confessions. "She's working on a science project about butterflies," Jack said, a quiet joy lighting his tired face. "She's convinced if we make the right environment, they'll stay through winter. I can't bring myself to tell her they'll fly away." Elena smiled genuinely, not the media-trained smile she'd mastered over years of press events. "Let her find out on her own," she said softly. "Some truths are better discovered than taught." "You sound like you've lived that," Jack said, studying her face. She traced the edge of her glass, a gesture that revealed more than she realized. "I built my first computer when I was 12. It crashed in flames figuratively, thankfully. My father watched from the hallway and said, 'Failure teaches more than success ever could.' He wasn't wrong, but a little encouragement wouldn't have hurt." "Is he still around?" Jack asked. "Technically," she said. "He's lecturing in Vienna this year. We exchanged birthday emails. That's the extent of it." Something passed between them then, a shared silence filled with understanding of isolation, of endurance, of trying to be whole when half your soul has been trained to feel nothing or has been lost. The bar emptied slowly, but neither noticed. The world outside kept turning, indifferent, but inside, to people who should have never crossed paths sat tethered by the invisible thread of human ache and resilience. Strangers who saw each other more clearly in a few hours than most ever do in a lifetime. Jack didn't ask for her number. She didn't offer it. But when she left, she turned back at the door, paused, and gave him a look that wasn't flirtation. It was gratitude, maybe even hope. And Jack, for the first time in years, found himself watching the door, long after someone had walked through it, wondering not if she would come back, but if, perhaps, he wanted her to. She shrugged, as if the question she'd asked and the wound it touched was a casual exchange between strangers. Then her eyes, steady but searching, found his again. "What about your daughter's mother?" Jack took a breath, not sharp or shaky, just practiced. "A muscle memory. She passed 5 years ago. Heart condition. We thought it was under control." The words fell like smooth stones rounded over time, recited so many times they no longer cracked open his chest when spoken, but they still lived beneath his ribs. "I'm sorry," Elena said, and this time it wasn't polite. It was human, quiet, but sincere. A silence followed, but it wasn't awkward. It held something gentle, shared understanding. The bartender, having learned to read atmospheres better than most therapists, refilled their drinks without a word. Jack glanced at his glass, then at her. "You know anything about stars?" Elena gave a soft laugh, the kind that carried both irony and exhaustion. Theoretically, I funded an observatory for my alma mater last year, but I haven't had time to visit. Sounds absurd when I say it out loud. Jack smiled faintly. I teach my daughter about constellations from our balcony. Found a telescope at a garage sale. Nothing fancy, but it works. Sometimes I think she's learning more from it than from school. That simple image the father and daughter beneath a modest sky. Finding galaxies through a smudged lens lingered. In the air like dust caught in sunlight. They talked for nearly 3 hours. One of those rare conversations where time folded in on itself. They moved from childhood memories to favorite novels. From Jack's trial-and-error approach to helping Lily with homework that had grown beyond him, to Elena's frustration with board members who underestimated her intelligence because she was beautiful, or underestimated her compassion because she was powerful. No last names were exchanged, no job titles, no status cues, just to people, unmasked and anonymous, crossing the kind of emotional terrain that often remains untouched even between lovers. Here, in this bar where no one asked questions and no one took photos, they were simply human. As the clock neared midnight, Elena glanced at her watch and sighed reluctantly. I should go. I've got an early meeting. Murphy brought the check. She reached for it. Jack began to protest, out of habit, but she stopped him with a subtle shake of her head. Please, let me. There was a quiet insistence in her voice. This wasn't about money. It was about gratitude for a night when she hadn't needed to lead, command, impress, or defend. She stood, and for a brief moment, looked at him not like a stranger, but like someone who had seen something rare. You're the only person who made me feel visible tonight, she said. Thank you. Before Jack could gather a reply, she was gone, the door swinging shut behind her, leaving behind only the faintest trace of her perfume and the echo of something unspoken. Jack sat still, the echo of the evening reverberating inside him. He told himself it was a fluke, the planets aligning briefly before returning to their distant orbits. He left a tip for Murphy, walked home under the weight of the stars he and Lily watched each night, paid the babysitter, and checked on his daughter. Her small form curled safely under the covers, her breath slow and even. He told himself that was the end of it. But the next evening, far across the city, Elena was moving through her penthouse with a kind of restless energy she didn't understand. Her calendar warned of 3 upcoming meetings, all important. Her assistant was texting with increasing urgency about changes to her itinerary. But instead of preparing her quarterly review or returning investor calls, Elena was seated in the back of her town car, changing out of her designer suit into jeans and a simple blouse. The diamond earrings came off next, then the watch, all the symbols of her power quietly removed. I'll call when I need you, Thomas, she said to her driver, her voice calm but resolute. She didn't look back at his raised eyebrows. Murphy's corner hadn't changed. Its charm lay in that very permanence, the worn wood, the smell of old beer and lemon cleaner, the quiet hum of conversation that asked nothing of her. She pushed open the door, her heart quickening, not that she admitted it to herself. She looked instinctively toward the stool Jack had occupied. It was empty. Still, she took her seat, the same one, ordered the same whiskey, and waited. An hour passed. Then 2 people came and went, a couple toasting to 15 years of marriage, a group of tired office workers laughing louder than their jokes deserved, a woman about Elena's age, sipping wine and reading a tattered novel. But Jack didn't come. Murphy refilled her glass without a word, but she caught him glancing at her with something like curiosity. He doesn't come in every night, Murphy said finally, wiping a spot on the counter. Usually just Tuesdays and Fridays. Elena felt the flush of embarrassment rising. Her cheeks. She'd been so obvious. We just had a conversation, she said, then trailed off. How could she explain what even she couldn't define? Murphy nodded as if this made perfect sense. Jack's a good man. Doesn't talk to strangers much. You must have made an impression. Elena's instincts kicked in, not the ones trained for mergers or investor meetings, but the deeper ones, sharpened by survival and curiosity. She didn't ask, but Murphy continued anyway. Runs a little repair shop on Westfield. Matthews Repair. Fixes anything mechanical. Honest work. Rebuilt my freezer last summer after the supplier quoted me double. She nodded slowly, committing every detail to memory. When she'd finished her drink, she reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, thick, cream-colored, with her name and title in crisp silver embossing. Then, turning it over, she hesitated before writing something, just a few words in her neat, confident hand. If you ever need more than an old repair shop, call me. She didn't sign it, just scribbled her private number, the one only 5 people in the world had. Would you give this to him if he comes in again? She asked. Sure thing, miss, Murphy replied, tucking the card under the register. She left a generous tip, then walked out, pausing briefly to glance back at the small, worn bar with the flickering neon sign. Somehow, this humble place had offered her a deeper peace than any 5-star hotel suite or corner office ever had. She didn't understand the pull she felt, not entirely, but for once, she didn't try to analyze it. For once, she let herself feel it. 6 days passed. Friday evening, Jack reached into the pocket of his worn denim jacket and felt the card, a small rectangle of weight and meaning. Murphy had slipped it in casually, with only a raised eyebrow and no explanation. Jack turned it over in his hands. Elena Winters, CEO, Horizon Tech. He looked her up online. Photos filled the screen. Her on stage, her in boardrooms, her shaking hands with the kind of people Jack only saw on television. She looked commanding, confident, untouchable. The headlines called her brilliant, uncompromising, visionary. He stared at the image of her in a tailored dress beneath stage lights and tried to reconcile it with the woman who'd sat 3 stools away, talking about constellations and childhood failure. He placed the card in his desk drawer, closed it, told himself again it had been a moment, one that couldn't possibly mean anything. But then again, why had it meant everything? When 2 souls adrift in their own silent universes collide, even briefly, it changes something. Jack told himself it was better this way. One conversation, a temporary escape from reality, then back to their separate, predictable lives. But fate doesn't always honor our attempts at closure. On a wine-bitten Thursday morning, Jack was called out to the Meridian manufacturing plant, a sprawling industrial complex, responsible for fabricating precision components for some of the city's most influential tech firms. A critical machine had failed, and downtime meant hemorrhaging thousands of dollars an hour. Jack was shoulder deep in the motor housing, elbow slick with oil, when he heard it, the unmistakable staccato rhythm of high heels on concrete, followed by a murmuring chorus of clipped, polished voices. Since implementing the new system, Miss Winters, output has increased by 17%, came a voice trailing authority. Quality control metrics have stabilized as well. Jack paused, heart jolting against his ribs, slowly, deliberately. He backed out of the machine and wiped his hands on his warm work cloth. And there she was, Elena Winters, dressed in a sculpted navy suit that commanded attention without effort. She walked the production floor with poised confidence, nodding at data points, asking incisive questions about labor practices and machinery efficiency, her sharp gaze scanning the room like a spotlight. Then her eyes met his. The moment stretched, like wire tight, delicate. Recognition flickered across her features, breaking through her composed exterior. Surprise, brief and unguarded, lit her face before she whispered something to her entourage and began walking toward him. Jack suddenly became acutely aware of his appearance: grease on his hands, oil on his faded work shirt, boots that had seen years of wear. He straightened, meeting her gaze with cautious reserve. "Jack," she said softly, like the name itself carried weight she hadn't fully grasped until now. He offered a nod, formal, guarded. "Miss Winters," she gave the faintest smile, almost imperceptible. "Elena," she corrected. Then, more quietly, more vulnerably, "I came back. You weren't there." Her words pierced the space between them, direct, unapologetic. Why would someone like you want to talk to someone like me? Jack asked before he could stop himself, the question unfiltered, raw. Elena looked over her shoulder at the executives, pretending not to listen, at the workers half watching, then back at him. Walk with me, she said, not quite in order, but with the natural gravity of someone used to being obeyed. They moved to a quieter part of the facility, the echo of their footsteps bouncing off concrete walls, the humming machine softening behind them. I don't need anything from you, she said once they were alone. Do you know how rare that is in my life? I just wanted to talk to someone who doesn't care who I am. Jack raised his hands, still marked by grease and labor. I know who you are now, and I'm very aware of who I am. Are you? Elena asked, tilting her head. Because I see a man who rebuilt his life around what matters. A man who talks about stars and butterflies with the same reverence he gives machines. That's who I met at the bar. His defenses wavered at her words, fragile under their quiet honesty. And who were you at the bar? Elena's reply came without hesitation. Someone who could breathe for the first time in years. A beat of silence. Will you meet me there tonight? She asked. Not by accident this time. The question lingered in the air, suspended between their realities and the fragile possibility of something more. Jack thought about his full schedule, Lily's school assignments, bedtime routines, the many reasons to say no. 8 o'clock. He said instead. That evening, Jack arrived at Murphy's Corner exactly on time. He'd arranged for Mrs. Donnelly, his kind-hearted neighbor, to watch Lily for the evening. He'd showered, trimmed his beard, and pulled on the one decent shirt. He owned a deep blue, the color still crisp, the fabric just slightly snug across his shoulders. His hair was damp, his pulse uneasy. Elena was already there. She was seated in what he now thought of as her stool. Gone was the suit, the armor. She wore jeans, a soft gray sweater, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, without makeup, without posture. She looked years younger, or maybe just freer, and when she smiled, it was something altogether different, shy, open, real. You came, she said gently, as he took the seat beside her. So did you, he replied, noting her phone was tucked in her purse now on the counter. A quiet decision, a signal. Murphy approached, his eyes twinkling with unspoken understanding. The usual for both of you. They nodded, then exchanged a surprised glance. A usual, after just one night. I guess proper introductions are in order, Jack said. Once Murphy retreated. Jack Matthews, owner of Matthews Repair Shop, father to an 8-year-old butterfly enthusiast named Lily. Elena extended her hand with mock solemnity. Elena Winters, CEO of Horizon Tech, collector of accolades and, lately, a growing awareness of how little they mean. Their hands met her smooth fingers against his calloused palm, a strange, electric equilibrium between two worlds that rarely touched. I wouldn't call a $300 million company an empty achievement, Jack said. Elena tilted her head. Depends on what you're measuring. She leaned in slightly, her eyes softening. Tell me about Lily's butterflies. And just like that, they fell back into the rhythm of conversation as if no time had passed. But now, there was a current running beneath their words, a mutual knowing. They understood what waited outside this bar, responsibilities, expectations, different worlds. But instead of creating distance, it brought them closer, anchored by a shared hunger for authenticity. 3 weeks later, Elena's Blacktown car pulled up outside Matthew's Repair Shop just after closing. She had texted earlier, "Can I see where you work? No ulterior motive, just curious." Jack's response had been brief. As always, doors open until 6. The shop was exactly as she imagined: chaos and craftsmanship, the scent of oil and iron, parts stacked in a kind of organized mess that spoke of years of real work. Jack looked up from a half-dismantled motor as the bell jingled above the door. "Sorry for the mess," he said, though he didn't sound sorry. Elena stepped inside, surveying the space with something close to reverence. "It's perfect. Reminds me of my first workshop in college." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You had a workshop?" She picked up a wrench, tested its weight with familiarity. Where did you think technology comes from? I built prototypes before. I built a boardroom. She moved around the space, asking intelligent questions, identifying tools, naming parts, offering the occasional suggestion like how he could optimize the layout of his inventory. And instead of brushing her off, Jack found himself listening. You're full of surprises. Elena Winters, he murmured as she crouched to examine a vintage motorcycle he was restoring. She glanced up, a smear of grease across her cheek, the look in her eyes unguarded. So are you, Jack Matthews, she replied. Not many people see past the CEO to the woman underneath. Not many people see past the repair guy either. He said dot, and in that moment amid the scent of oil and rust and quiet understanding it became clear. They weren't strangers anymore. They were becoming something else entirely. He paused, the words tangled in his throat not because he lacked the vocabulary, but because no phrase felt quite right when standing before him. Jack, the man who rebuilt more than broken gadgets. Elena, with quiet grace, bridged the gap. I see you, Jack, she whispered, her eyes steady and searching. That simple statement, I see you, carried more depth than poetry could have offered. It pierced the outer layers and found the place beneath where truth and longing meet, surrounded by the scent of solder, the hum of machines, and the stillness that followed honest work. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of kindred spirits both shaped by past wounds, both quietly healing. Later, as Jack closed up his small shop, surprise flickered across his face when he found himself asking, "Would you like to come to dinner at my place?" He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Lily's been asking about the lady who knows about stars since I told her we talked. The invitation hung between them like a doorway neither dared to open before. Elena hesitated for only a heartbeat before stepping through. "I like that, very much." Jack's apartment bore the modest touch of a life built on practicality. To bedrooms in a weathered brick building furnished with a mix of necessity and sentiment. One wall was lined with framed photographs and a constellation of Lily's vibrant, crayon-drawn masterpieces. Books nestled into shelves told quiet stories of Jack's unexpected love for poetry, astronomy, and old adventure novels. Before Jack could answer the knock, Lily had already flung the door wide open. Her face lit up like a firework, small for her age, with a wild halo of curls and her father's chestnut eyes. She greeted Elena without ceremony. "Are you Daddy's friend who knows about stars?" Elena, in crisp designer pants, lowered herself to the girl's level with ease. "I know a little," she said, her voice gentle, "but I hear you're the real expert." Lily beamed. "I can show you my constellation map, and my butterflies, they're in chrysalises now. That means they're changing even though you can't see it." Elena looked up at Jack, her eyes soft. "Sounds like people sometimes." 2 months passed. A local business magazine ran a feature titled Horizon Tech's Rising Trajectory, lauding the company's push toward eco-conscious innovation. But it wasn't the column inches that caught attention, it was the photograph. Elena Winters, the ever-composed CEO, exiting a modest apartment in the city's western fringe, her smile unguarded and unlike any capture before by noon. Gossip sites had pieced it together. Jack Matthews, single father, repair shop owner. By evening, the headlines had shifted from corporate triumph to salacious curiosity. Tech titan in blue collar. Romance. Photos flooded social media. Elena in jeans at a neighborhood cafe. Jack beside her. A Lily licking chocolate ice cream. The internet lost its mind. Elena's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Her PR team scrambled to contain the narrative. The bored, tight-lipped and image-conscious fired off carefully phrased concerns. Tweets ranged from power couple redefines class to midlife crisis or brand play. At Horizon's quarterly press conference, a reporter finally asked what everyone else had been whispering. "Miss Winters, can you comment on your relationship with Jack Matthews and whether it impacts investor confidence in your leadership?" A hush blanketed the room. Her PR director moved to intervene, but Elena lifted a calm hand. "My personal life is exactly that personal," she said, her voice even but resolute. That said, Horizon Tech was built on the idea that innovation grows from the unexpected. That applies to technology and to people. Next question. Later that night, Jack waited until Lily was asleep before speaking. His voice was low. I saw the news. Your board can't be thrilled. They'll live. Elena said with a weak smile. CEOs have been in tabloids before, but it's usually for dating a venture capitalist or marrying into a dynasty, not. Her eyes wandered around the apartment. Not dating a guy who fixes broken microwaves. Jack finished for her. Elena's tone sharpened. Is that what's bothering you? That you think you're beneath me, aren't I? He asked, not angrily, but honestly, in their eyes, in the world's eyes. You built an empire. I rebuilt coffee makers. I count the cost of lilies, school supplies, and that makes you less. Elena stood, frustration blooming. You think I'd risk everything I built just for the optics, for charity? Give me more credit than that. Then what am I to you? Jack asked, the words raw. Because I don't fit in your world. Elena's anger ebbed into something softer, more haunted. Maybe I don't want to fit in that world anymore, she whispered. She sat beside him, took his hand. The press, the board, the titles they know. Elena Winters, CEO. You and Lily? You know, just Elena, the woman who explains constellations and checks on butterfly cocoons. She met his eyes. Those versions of me feel more real than the one I've spent years perfecting. 3 months into their quietly growing love, Horizon faced a major crisis. Elena reverted to old habits, 16-hour days, missed dinners, unanswered messages. Jack, understanding but disappointed, sent a lunch delivery to her office with a simple note. Remember to breathe. We'll be here when you're ready. In the privacy of her office. Elena wept, torn between the life she carved and the one she was just beginning to believe. She deserved. Then one day, Lily fell sick at school. Jack, stuck miles away at a breakdown job, called Elena in a panic. Without hesitation, she left a crucial strategy meeting, swept into the school, and cradled Lily like she had always belonged in that role. That evening, Jack returned to find them asleep on the couch. Elena curled protectively round Lily, a storybook resting on the edge of her lap. Her heels were discarded, her hair unkempt. No trace of the corporate mask remained, only warmth and tenderness. Jack stood in the doorway, something inside him shifting forever. 6 months in, Horizon's annual gala glittered across the skyline. Elena, resplendent in midnight blue, took Jack's hand and led him in without hesitation. It was a deliberate choice, a public integration of the personal and professional. Her worlds no longer compartmentalized. Jack, out of place in a room of tailored suits and jargon-laced conversations kept near the walls. He overheard the younger executives whisper, her charity projects here. Must be some community outreach initiative. Before the shame could fester, Elena heard them too. She turned, her voice cutting clean and calm through the hum of champagne flutes. Gentlemen, she said, her tone assuaged, Jack is not a project. He is not an initiative. He is the man who reminds me who I am when the noise gets too loud. And if either of you ever devalues him again, you'll be reminded that I built this company from nothing, so I have no trouble dismantling egos. They shrank away, and she returned to Jack, taking his hand once more. No words were needed. In that moment, as starlight spilled through the grand glass dome above them, Elena wasn't a CEO commanding a room. She was simply a woman who had finally found home, not in a high-rise, not in quarterly earnings, but in the steady, unshakable gaze of a man who saw her, wholly and honestly, and in the gentle breath of a sleeping child, who believed that stars and butterflies and people could all change quietly, beautifully from the inside out. Jack Matthews had never aspired to be the kind of man who stood in spotlights. He lived in the realm of wires and gears, a quiet soul who fixed the broken pieces of machines and, unknowingly, his own heart, one screw at a time. Elena Winters saw that, not the stoic handyman the world assumed, but the man underneath, a father, a builder of futures, a gentle force of quiet resilience. I see you, Jack, she said one evening, her voice barely louder than a whisper yet heavier than 1,000 declarations. They stood in his workshop, surrounded by the scent of old metal and warm light. It wasn't romantic in the conventional sense, but something sacred passed between them in that moment of recognition of souls who had grown tired of masks. Later that night, after locking the shop, Jack surprised even himself. "Would you like to come to dinner at my place?" He shifted awkwardly. "Lily's been asking about the lady who knows stars. I may have mentioned you." The question lingered in the air like an unspoken vow. Elena hesitated, then nodded, her smile as genuine as the woman behind it. "I like that very much." Jack's apartment wasn't much to bedrooms nestled in an aging building, walls bearing the gentle wear of time, but it radiated warmth. Family photographs adorned one wall, next to Lily's crayon constellations and a bookshelf filled with classics that hinted at Jack's quiet intellect. Before Jack could even reach the door, Lily flung it open with uncontainable joy. Small for her 8 years, she bore her father's thoughtful eyes and a mess of curls that, Elena suspected, came from the woman in the photos. "Are you the star lady?" she asked bluntly. "I know a little," Elena replied, crouching down without caring for the creases in her expensive trousers. "But I hear you're the real expert." Lily beamed. "I can show you my constellation chart and my butterflies. They're in the chrysalises. That means they're changing even if you can't see it. Like people," Elena murmured, glancing at Jack with a knowing smile. "Sometimes the change happens deep inside, where no one's looking." 2 months later, Elena's world, the corporate, spotlight-laden universe of CEOs and shareholders, collided with Jack's quiet corner of the city. A local business feature titled Horizon Tech's Rising Trajectory ran a photo of Elena, smiling warmly as she exited Jack's humble building. It was the kind of smile rarely caught in her boardroom photos and guarded, real. Speculation exploded. Headlines asked, "Tech Queen falls for repairman." Tabloids salivated. Her phone became a battlefield of PR damage control and investor. Unease dotted a quarterly earnings press conference. A bold reporter finally voiced what everyone was whispering. "Miss Winters, can you comment on your relationship with Jack Matthews and how it might affect investor confidence?" Elena could have dodged it. Her PR team tried, but she raised a hand, calm and unshaken. "My personal life," she said evenly, "is personal. But I will say this: Horizon Tech was built on the belief that innovation comes from unexpected places. I carry that belief into every part of my life." Later that evening, the fallout reached Jack. "I saw the headlines," he said quietly once Lily was asleep. "Your board can't be thrilled. They'll live." Elena answered, feigning ease. "It's not like I'm the first CEO to date." "No," he murmured, glancing around the modest apartment. "But it's usually another executive. Not this." She heard the crack in his voice. "Not a repairman, you mean? Not someone beneath you?" Jack confessed, eyes downcast. "You built an empire." "I fixed toasters and budget for school supplies." Elena stood, frustrated now not with him, but with the wound behind his words. "Do you honestly believe I'd risk my name, my company, just to play pretend that this you is a charity project?" Jack searched her face. "Then what am I to you?" Her features softened. "Maybe I don't want to fit in that world anymore," she whispered. "Maybe the version of me who laughs with Lily about butterflies and talks about constellations, that's the real me, the one I never got to be." 3 months passed, and Elena was pulled back into the orbit of corporate crises and impossible schedules. She began canceling dinners, sending apologies. Jack didn't argue. Instead, he sent lunch to her office, grilled cheese and tomato soup, with a note in Lily's handwriting that said, "Remember to breathe. We're still here." Elena wept quietly in her office that day, torn between the image she'd crafted and the life she never thought she could have. When Lily caught a fever at school and Jack was stranded at a rural repair job, he called Elena in desperation. Without hesitation, she left a crucial meeting and raced to the school. She held Lily's tiny hand through the fever and whispered stories about the stars. When Jack came home, he found them asleep on the couch, Elena curled protectively around Lily, a storybook still open on her lap. In that quiet, Jack felt something in him shift. Some ache he thought permanent now softened by this woman who wasn't pretending. 6 months later, Horizon Tech hosted its annual gala. Elena invited Jack as her guest. Publicly, boldly, they stood, together beneath glittering chandeliers, a picture that didn't fit the mold. Jack overheard the whispers, community outreach project, charity case, but before he could step away, Elena turned to the murmuring executives. "You see a man in a borrowed suit," she said, steady and unflinching. "I see someone whose ideas have saved Horizon millions, someone whose integrity is richer than any of us here tonight. Jack Matthews isn't beneath anyone in this room. He's the most authentic person here." 9 months after that first awkward invitation, Elena invited Jack to co-develop a program called Foundations of Practical Education Initiative. For underserved communities, for the first time, their worlds didn't clash, they merged, each holding its shape but creating something stronger together. 1 year from the night they met, the three of them returned to the small diner where it all began as they waited for dessert. Lily's expression turned contemplative. "I was thinking about Mom today," she said quietly, her eyes on Elena. Jack reached over instinctively. "That's important. Sweetheart, you don't ever have to stop thinking about her." "I know," Lily nodded, "but if I could choose someone to be in our family, I'd choose you." Tears welled in Elena's eyes, her composure faltering for once. "Is that okay to say?" Lily asked softly. "I don't want to make anyone sad." Elena reached for her, voice thick with emotion. "It's more than okay. It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said to me." Jack watched them, something inside him finally settling. "You made us visible again," he whispered to Elena, echoing the words she'd once said to him that night after Lily had fallen asleep. They stood together on his small balcony. Above them, the city glow gave way to stars. "Do you remember your question?" Jack asked, voice soft. "That night you asked if I had one wish, who would I use it for?" "I do," Elena replied, turning toward him. "I asked to understand the kind of man you were, and did my answer tell you? It told me you were someone worth knowing." Her voice trembled. "But I never asked what you would wish for." "What about now?" Jack looked at her, really looked. "Nothing," he said at last, for the first time in years. "I don't have a wish, just gratitude." Elena smiled, her heart echoing the same. "No fairy tale, no perfect ending, just two imperfect people, piecing together something real, founded not on status or show, but on healing, grace, and the miracle of being truly seen."